Awesome, cool. So they just asked if I wanted sparkles before I came out, and I was like, sparkles? Cool, sounds fun, let's do that. So yeah, fantastic. So hello Kawaiicon, how are you doing? I hope you're all awake and more than I am at midday, maybe. So yes, anyway, I'm here to speak about my talk, Hunting for Gargoyles. It's a little bit of a last-minute filling in slot, so apologies in advance if the slide deck is a little bit too corporate, not as kawaii as it could have been. I tried. There's a little bit of kawaii in there. So, quick agenda before we get started. I'm going to talk about who I am very briefly, don't worry, because this is the first time I've been in Kawaiicon or KiwiCon or New Zealand at all. Nice country. Thank you for having me in here. Yay. I'm going to talk very briefly about the attack itself, Gargoyle, very briefly, because I've only got a 30-minute time slot, and this is the slot just for lunch, so I don't want to overrun, because then I'll be very hungry. Then I'll talk about detection, which is the interesting, cool stuff where we'll talk about, the kernel and all that jazz. And then I'll talk a little bit about automating the attack and automating the detection, and the kind of pitfalls that it's easy to fall into and the things to look out for when doing so. So, first off, about me. I'm Aliz Hammond. Don't worry about pronouncing my name wrong. Everyone does it. Don't worry. I'm based in Singapore. Been there for about 3-4 years-ish. I'm all the way from England, as you can see from this fantastic chap who is, yes, well, if you follow British politics, you probably recognize the picture. My background is in kind of bug finding, exploitation. I like fuzzing things. I like writing exploits. I like, I don't want to say breaking things, but kind of breaking things and fixing them sometimes, yeah. Hobbies-wise, I'm into like DIY, chess, electronics, old computers. If anyone wants to talk about old computers, come and talk to me about them. They're fun stuff. Because I like to dabble in electronics, kind of digital electronics, because analog's too hard for me. But I like to dabble in digital electronics, and that has given me this mindset of when I approach a computer problem about detection of malware. I'll come from the bottom up. I'll start looking at the kernel first and move upwards, as opposed to an upward-down approach of looking at a web browser and then all that stuff. It's just the orientation of my mindset, maybe. My role at F-Secure Countercept is that I'm a researcher supporting threat hunters. So all my time is spent doing research into real-world attacks. Okay, yeah, I say that, and then at the end, the first question I always get after this talk is, have you seen this attack in the wild? And I have to say no. So I look into real-world attacks and this one. So I'm not a threat hunter myself, so I'm not like up to date with all like the latest APTs and threats. Typically, I'm kind of a point of elevation for the threat hunting team. That they have like an amount of time that's budgeted to research, and if something's going to go over that, they'll throw it off to me, and I'll have to like go and stare at it repeatedly until it gets into submission and I figure it out. Anyway, onto the first section of what is Gargoyle, since it's not particularly well known. I think it should be. But to really describe it well, I need to go into a bit of historical context, and I'm sure you all well, I'm guessing a lot of you might know this already if you do like malware research and that kind of thing. Stick with me, it'll get interesting, promise. So if we think back in the day, the 2000s kind of era, when malware came onto your system, speaking from a purely Windows perspective here, when malware came into your system, it would use some bug, break into your system, and then typically drop some kind of malicious executable. So it might be, back office, sub 7, that kind of era. It would be written to your disk, and then the registry would be modified so that it would be loaded and all that jazz. So the industry responded with antiviruses that would examine every file on the disk and look for suspicious things. But one thing I do want to point out here is that when this was done, there was usually almost always a filter on file types. So if someone has a gigantic 10 megabyte bitmap image, the antivirus wouldn't scan through it for like an MBR infector, because that would just be silly and it would take too long. And in contrast to it being an optimization to make things faster, it's more of an optimization to make things like usable and possible. Here's a relic. I don't know if you can see, but this is the blaster worm from back in the day, complete with vitriol to poor Mr. Bill Gates. Anyway, after that era, timeframes are very, very approximate here. After that era, people started dropping their malware into memory and running systems, wanted to avoid hitting the disk, avoid this detection. So because of that, we started to see EDR tools that would examine system memory in real time, scan for badness, that kind of thing. And again, these tools would filter based on memory permissions. So if you had a system that had, say, 8 gigabytes of RAM in it, you couldn't feasibly scan that at the kind of real-time speeds you want to be able to scan without excluding all the memory that isn't marked as executable. So again, if you've got your gigantic 100 megabyte bitmap image, say, then you don't want to be scanning that for signs of infection. So you would filter based on the memory permissions that the CPU's got set on. I tried to get a good example. This is as good as I could get. Here's an executable memory range which might contain some malware. So the whole Gargoyle attack is an evolution of that, I think, to some degree. And it works by hiding malicious code in areas of memory which aren't executable. It's a really cool attack. It's been around for a couple of years. I say the POC was out March 2017, and until I did this research, there was no detection method, at least that I'm aware of, that I could find. Maybe my Googling skills weren't up to it. Here's my screenshot. All I'm saying here is all we've got here is some memory that's readable, read-write. There could be badness lurking in there, and we wouldn't know about it. I don't know. As I alluded earlier, I'm sorry. We haven't seen this in the wild, but this could be because it's hard to detect. We have seen our own red team using it, though. This is a post by one of our guys, Wilberg S, back in 2018. I say one of our guys. I'm sorry. We were acquired. We used to be MWR, and we were acquired by F-Secure, so sorry about the confusion there. But this is one of our guys took a Cobalt Strike beacon and modified it to use Gargoyle such that it's much more stealthy. So we don't see it in the wild, but we use it. Not sure if that counts. OK, so onward to talk about what it is. So as I alluded to before, it's a method of hiding executable payloads and malware in non-executable memory, which is quite a feat given the difficulty of subverting that. This executable code is very briefly made executable in a kind of time window. And I say very briefly, there's a POC of the attack, which I think it's every 5 minutes or I can't remember now. Oops. OK, every so often, it will sleep for a while and then pop a message box and say hello. So you could have your malware implant, could sit there, could sleep for 5 seconds, come up for like 100 milliseconds, make itself executable, run itself, go back to sleep. And unless your EDR tool is scanning right at the right moment, just at the right moment, then you're going to miss it. No good. So here's a fantastic animated GIF that I found online, and I found this GIF, and I was like, there's no way I'm not putting that in my presentation. Here's two threat hunters, I guess, who are with a client system in the center in gray, and they've gone through this system with their EDR tools and their forensic tools, and I've like, no, there's no baddies on this machine. This is completely clean. There's no APT. There's nothing here. It's all good. It's so clean, they're going to get a selfie with the picture itself. But what they don't know is this gargoyle becomes magically animated. I love this guy's expression, man. It's just like, it's just priceless. Yeah, fantastic, fantastic. Oh, I could look at that all day. OK, I'm going to advance the slide so I don't look at it all day. So anyway, the whole thing of the gargoyle in mythology, staying there for hundreds of years and then becoming magically animated one day and all that. It's that kind of thing. So you might be thinking this is easy to do by having a small stub of code that you have like your main malware is all non-executable, and then you have a tiny little stub which is in charge of waking up the main payload and making it executable and calling it. But Gargoyle, it doesn't do that. And this is why it's such a cute attack, such a kawaii attack. It has no executable code at all during the dormant stage. And this is why I kind of really like it and think it's a really cool kind of thing. So the way it kind of gets around this or the way it wakes itself up is by abusing system facilities. And the system facility it uses is a system timer, which is a feature that Windows provides to essentially it's just a callback. But the callback obviously can't call non-executable memory without like access faulting, without faulting and badness happening. So to get around the lack of executable memory, the Gargoyle attack uses the same techniques that exploit writers have been using for years, right? Which is the magic of the VOP chain. So your system timer simply points to a stack pivot, and then there's a VOP chain that calls virtual protect, makes the main malware executable, invokes it, and then when it returns, makes it non-executable once again, and goes back to sleep. So the attack can be summarized pretty much as a system timer calling a VOP chain that makes non-executable memory into executable for long enough that it can run. I'm not going to labor this. That's all I'm going to say about the attack. But I'd love to talk about it more, but as I say, it's a half-hour presentation. This is, I adapted this from a 1-hour slide deck. So yes, we'll see how this goes. So anyway, on to the fun stuff, detection. Yay. So how are we going to detect this? So first thing I like to look at is list out all the artifacts that this kind of technique is going to leave running on the system. And there's some non-executable memory. But this is, maybe there's something clever you could do in terms of like analyzing everything on the system and saying, this isn't marked as code, but it kind of looks like it could be. But I figure this is going to be difficult to do, and it's going to be error-prone, and you're going to have to scan through all of the memory. And the other kind of artifact that looked more interesting to me was the system time itself. Because if we can look at all these timers, we enumerate a list of timers, see where they're all going, and figure stuff out. So, okay, cool. But it turns out getting any information about the state of system timers in the system is actually really difficult from user mode. There's no real ways of doing it. All of the functionality is in the kernel, and there's some very thin wrappers that just call the kernel components. So, okay, no problem, time to break out the kernel debugger, we can handle this. So I was like, okay. But inside the kernel, there's also an incredibly sparsely documented kind of functionality here. There are functions to initialize them, to set them, get rid of them, and that's about it. You can't list them, you can't interrogate them, and that kind of thing. So it's like, okay, time for reverse engineering. Okay, so I sat down with the Windows internal books and tried to figure this out. And I've really found there wasn't really any kind of easy undocumented way. So obviously doing security research, we're not supposed to do undocumented things, but we always have to, like the PB, the TB, And there wasn't anything that was kind of stable over Windows versions or kind of reliable enough to use. So I was like, So I was a bit stumped. So I started Googling, as I always do when I'm stumped with a particularly difficult problem. And of course, volatility comes to the rescue. Yay, volatility. So it turns out volatility ships with a plugin, timers.py, which will list system timers. Fantastic. It was the only tool I could find that would list these timers. So I was like, okay, great. It can enumerate these. It can find the APC being essentially a description of a callback. Okay, great. That's pretty much all we need. So I zoomed off and started trying to have a look at it. I'm not sure if you can read this. I guess the actual content isn't particularly important. There's just numbers here, words there. It's fine. The leftmost one is the interesting one because it points to a struct of type etimer, which is just a structure that holds information about the timer that we want to know. Here's the description in WinDebug. I don't know if people are familiar with WinDebug doing kernel debugging. WinDebug's fantastic for this stuff. It's like typical Microsoft tool. It's fantastic. It's brilliant. Has like 10 years of legacy behind it. But yeah, so anyway, I don't think my laser pointer is going to work that far. Oh, no, it won't. Oh, well. So anyway, you can see there's some fun information there. You get a timer period, and you get timer APC, which is the structure that describes what's going to happen when the timer fires. So it has the address of the code that's going to invoke. It has information needed to find the thread that it's going to use as a context and all of that kind of stuff. So that's all we need. Fantastic. So now we can go away and we can scribble up some stuff in volatility. And the kind of naive, obvious way of doing this is to enumerate all these timers, get a list of these handler functions, and then check out their prologues, right? If you would expect each one to have a fairly sensible-looking prologue, like make an x86 stack frame, do something sensible. You wouldn't expect like an obvious VOP stack pivot, right? If you see like pop pop ret, there's something fishy going on. So I fired up my my trusty Python interpreter, and I wrote something here. Oh, that's fairly big. I think you can all read that. We'll see. Anyway, the important thing is the point in the middle. Pop RCX, pop RSP ret. There's pop pop ret. Looks pretty suspicious. that's the gargoyle.exe is the POC that's available online. So yeah, that's kind of cool. So we could give this tool to our threat hunters, and we can say, OK, if you suspect this kind of thing, you can take a memory dump of the system, run it through this script, and you'll see what's going on. And that's cool, but it means that our threat hunters have to spend some time like looking at this and figuring it all out. So I started thinking, maybe we can automate it a bit, maybe we can figure more stuff out. So I was like, OK, let's give that a go, automation. The thing I want to stress here is that it's very easy to get very carried away with automation. It's like, if you do it too much, then you end up being the company that says, here's a magic box, and you put it on your internet connection, and all the hackers get stopped by it. And then you know the ones with the dashboard that says, oh yeah, 368 hack attacks blocked in the last 5 minutes, So yeah, that's something I want to avoid. We have, so the way that we do things at Countercept, so I hope this isn't like too corporate or whatever, but we have a team of threat hunters who essentially just spend their days looking through the events that are fired off by our EDR agent. So, OK, where was I? Yeah, so I went a bit off track there. So, as I say, automation has to be done carefully. And I think the best way I found to kind of explain this and state it in a good way is that it should be objective here. We shouldn't have some code that tries to figure out the intent of what's going on. So we shouldn't have code that says, this person is trying to hack your system. But we could have something very objective that says, oh, this timer has been used in an unusual way, or this code is here. So that was the kind of level of automation I was going for. The other thing I wanted to do very carefully was to fail safely, because it would be pretty bad if I made enough automation that it would, automate itself out of the loop or something. You don't want things to break, and yeah. So the way to do this in this case was to expose the behavior of the timer handler in a more accessible way, I think. So if we can find such data points as, does it perform a stack pivot? Pretty good data point. If that happens, there's a pretty high chance there's some maliciousness going on, and a human can go and take a look at it. Is there a call to virtual protect in this timer's handler? If there is, then that's pretty bad. And if there's a call to virtual protect that marks something executable, and then a branch to that address, that's almost certainly bad, and we need to go and wake up our threat hunting team and get them to go and do stuff, hunt some threats. So the way I chose to do this was to use an emulation framework. And the emulation framework I used was the fantastically named Unicorn engine. Hell yes, unicorns, yeah. I almost put some unicorns in this slide, but I didn't in the last minute, and I'm kind of regretting that now. There's not enough unicorns in this presentation. But yeah, Unicorn engine is a fantastic tool. I'm just going to plug it for a little bit because I love it, and a lot of the people I speak to haven't used it and don't know about it, and it makes my life a lot easier. It's just a very full-featured CPU emulation engine. I say light, it's as light as a fully featured CPU emulation engine can be. It's just based on QEMU, so Guy took a load of code out of QEMU and tidied it up and did a load of cool stuff, so you can simulate instructions very easy. You say, oh, here's some memory, what happens if I execute it? Cool. It does like a zillion different architectures, so if you're looking at like MIPS code or ARM or whatever, it'll do that. And you can call it from whatever your favorite language is, so in this case it was Python because it's all volatility, but call it from whatever you like. It's also actively maintained, which is hell yeah. And it's from this chap, Quinn, who wrote another tool called Capstone, which is like, awesome disassembler framework. And because they're both written by the same guy, they both play together really nicely, so you can do all your disassembly and then feed the data into the emulator without having to do loads of like weird stuff in between, right? It's fantastic. I just want to plug this because this is great. And unfortunately, in the original presentation, I had like a whole slide of me going on like a tangent with an entirely different project where this was really useful, but don't have time to share that. Maybe later when we're partying hard after the Sorry. When we're partying hard, I have a habit of stroking my beard. I just have to be careful not to do so. Probably I'll get glitter everywhere. Oh. OK, so anyway, I digress. So I went away and I scribbled up some code to do this. And this may well be too small for people to read. But there's just a column here that says, has it adjusted page permissions? And it says true, which is, I guess it's not a particularly glamorous looking I should have had it like with a burst of glitter or something. That would have been a bit more. But yeah, not very glamorous looking, but it detects it. And it fails safely as well in that if it can't emulate something, which happens like reasonably often, like not like reasonably often, but reasonably often. In that there's quite a lot that Unicorn can't do. Some things because it's unusual enough that it's not implemented. So things like using the 16 bits, CS, DS segment registers and that kind of thing, which seems like something I wouldn't need, but then you need it if you're using WEL 64 because it's used in all the thunking stuff. And then other stuff that it can't possibly do, like emulating other pieces of the hardware, like disk I/O or something. So in this case, we just like say, oh, we don't know what's going on here, you better take a look. And it happens infrequently enough that it's manageable. So yeah, oh wow, I have 9.5 minutes left, and I'm on my summary slide. I'm so pleased with myself. I hope I haven't gone too fast and really nervously spoke really fast. Anyway, okay, on to the final slide. Oh wow, oh that's 9 minutes more of lunch. Awesome. Okay, so I digress. Anyway, so yes, now we can detect this. This was my my yay moment that I was giving to our clients. Now, yes, now we can detect this, and you can too. All the code is up online. There's I did a huge blog post, and if you're into, or particularly if you'd like to be into Windows kernel stuff, and you're not quite sure kind of how to get into it or that kind of thing. If you check out the blog post that's attached to this, there's walkthroughs of, attach your kernel debugger and then type this command, and then you can see this, and then this means this. So it might be useful and interesting, hopefully. There's yeah, check it out. If you want more information on the attack, I could have spent an extra 8 minutes talking about the attack. Oh well, never mind. So if you want more information about the attack, which is by this chap, Josh something. I'm not going to say it just in case I mispronounce it, because it would be so disrespectful if I mispronounced his name while talking about his attack. But the chap who developed this attack, check it out. He has a nice graphic, and he explains it a lot better than me just saying, oh yeah, it's a WAP chain, it's great. If you're interested in me, check out my Twitter. It's my personal Twitter. I talk about loads of stuff. I always talk about computer security, breaking stuff, talk about old computers, fun stuff, and then I talk about loads of other stuff that might not interest you. So take it with a pinch of salt. You might like it, you might not. And I'll be happy to answer any questions the remaining 7 minutes and 40 seconds. Dun, 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 dun. Okay, you're all in a stunned, amazed silence by how great I am. I'll take that. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.